Hi, I'm Paul Friedman. I'm the founder of the Marriage Foundation. This topic is very deep. We're going to get into it because it's important. 5 things what not to do when your husband wants a divorce and you don't want it, and 1 thing that you should do. So again, this is a very important topic. These 5 things that I'm going to give you are very important. The last thing is even more important, and we'll get into it. Hopefully you're already a subscriber, but if not, it's going to help you to subscribe to this channel and getting in tune with how we at the Marriage Foundation see marriage. I'm going to start off by understanding that this is shocking, even if you saw it coming. It's not easy. It is many things. Among them, it's humiliating. It is disorienting. It is frightening. And we're going to help you get to the other side of this first reaction that you're having and get you on a path towards saving your marriage, because that is what you want to do if you've searched for this title. So the first thing is, don't react with anger. We all have grown up in a world where we think anger is a reasonable reaction to certain things, but in reality, when you really give it a lot of thought, it is never a reasonable reaction. It's an understandable one, but it's not reasonable because it's not productive. It undermines further the relationship that you have with your husband. One of the problems that he has had in your marriage has been that he has dealt with emotions, because women are taught in our world to own their emotions, to be emotional, to actually take pride in their emotions. And it's very unfortunate because emotions are very much misunderstood by people, including those who teach people to regard their emotions with honor. And I want to explain this because it's going to give you more context for where you are right now. So understand that I used to be a divorce mediator before I started helping people save their marriages. That was over 22 years ago. And I had a couple come to me who weren't just on the verge of divorce, but they had already gone through all of the steps. They were meeting with psychologists. They were ready to file. They came to me because they didn't hate each other and they wanted to end amicably, not only for their children, they had a couple of kids, but for themselves, because divorce is hell. There's just no getting around that. But I'm not a psychologist. My training isn't psychological training. I know many therapists because I was a mediator and they got me my clients. I like them. They're good people. But what I did in order to prepare for this first couple who asked me to help them, because I was and am, after all, a communications expert, I started diving into marriage from a different perspective than the different, what I consider wrong perspective of a psychological entity. Marriage is not. Your marriage is falling apart to the point of where your husband wants a divorce, not because of what you did, not because of his errors, but neither of you learned about marriage. You simply didn't understand marriage. And so instead of building on this amazing connection that you had as soulmates who have found each other, what happened was you started to, through misunderstanding, not understanding, you started taking everything, including your husband, and he with you, taking things for granted. And this is something that I made note of as a divorce mediator. I was highly successful. I was in San Diego, which is a very tough market, but I had all the business I could ever ask for because I was good at it, frankly. And I recognized that the first killer of marriage is over familiarity. You see, we stop realizing, remembering why we get married. In fact, we're not even taught to focus in on why we get married. So let's back up a little and acknowledge that we get married because we want to be happier. We found our soulmate. We learn more about them. They learn more about us during the dating and courting process. And we wanted to spend our lives together. And so had we had clearly in our mind that we wanted to, in order to be happier, in order to experience ever-increasing love, your marriage would have been quite different than how it is turning out. By the way, this video is about what you should do because you don't want to end your marriage, and we are going to get there. So understand that you need to learn these 5 things first. So anger is one of the things that undermines us as human beings. We are taught that if we have a quote-unquote anger problem, we should learn to manage anger. That is not good advice. We should learn how to eliminate it. And most people don't have any idea that that is possible. But it is quite possible when you know how. Just like people get into being married without knowing how, people lead their lives without knowing how, without understanding that we have so much more control than we are taught we have. We have free will. So do not react to your husband with anger. If you already have, which is possible, just say, I'm sorry, I got angry. And I will give you more little tips as we go along in this video. So don't react with anger. It is counterproductive. It is destructive. It is more of the same that pushed your marriage to where it stands right now. And you're not yet divorced. So there's lots of hope. Number 2, this is a suggestion that is based on how many people have told us that they did this, and it simply makes things worse. And the advice is, don't ask your husband why. Don't ask him why. It will have him go into the negative. He will start drawing and learning on his own more and more how to articulate the overall feeling that he has that is driving him to want to exit the marriage, get away from you, because that's really what we're talking about. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but you have to be realistic. You can't solve a problem that you can't identify. And so that may sound like it runs counter to my saying, don't ask him why, but it doesn't run counter. The whole point of that is that you know why. Asking him why is only going to give substance to his reasons. He may be saying he wants to divorce you because he's angry, because he's frustrated, because he's feeling unloved. And he doesn't really want a divorce, but perhaps he's telling you that to see what you would do. Well, asking him why is not going to get the correct answers, because if it is a lighter answer, like he wants to see what you're going to do, what you're doing is you're moving the conversation and the momentum in the wrong direction. Rather than asking him why, listen to what he has to say without reacting. You don't have to react. Everyone imagines that they have to react. One of the first things that I teach people in communication, in our courses, in the books that we have, is you don't have to react. Most people believe, because they are managed by their minds, that if they don't react, if there is a silence, that everything's going to fall apart. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are not obligated to react to anything just because it's upon us. In fact, the best advice is to absorb, hear, try and understand from his point of view what's going on without asking him. In other words, shift your perspective. Instead of going, how could he do this to me? Doesn't he know? Why? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with him? Don't go into all of those dark places. Instead, take a little bit of time, reflect, recognize that that marriage that you and he both wanted to succeed is not succeeding, but because you don't know how to be married. He doesn't know how to be married. And with both of you not knowing how to be married, and then sliding into over-familiarity, which is what I was talking about before, where you take each other for granted, you didn't build on your marriage. You didn't build on your relationship. And life is not this even-keeled thing. It's always moving either up or down, and marriages too are moving either up or down. They don't go steady. And so if you haven't been proactively feeding love and happiness into your marriage, then instead of going up, it's going down. It's really that simple. Now, number 3 is kind of the next part of number 2. Don't argue. Don't discuss. Don't get into it. We're taught we should get it all out on the table. No, we should not. This is not a business discussion. This is an affair of the heart. This is where the two of you have left the plane of love and joy that you wanted to share together, and you have descended into the mundane, where things are discussed, things are worked out. There's nothing to work out. Try to understand that this whole notion of working things out is misplaced in a marriage. Rather than working things out, you should not have things that need to be worked out, because your relationship is operating on a very high level. And you need to now start bringing your marriage back up to that level. It's so rare that it's too late. It's almost impossible that it's too late. So don't argue with him. Don't discuss it. If it comes up, change the subject. I'm going to tell you what you should be doing. That's after number 5. So you're not going to be stuck with, well, then what do I do? This is about what you don't do. Number 4, and this is important. Don't pretend that your marriage was fine, that you got caught off guard, that you didn't see it coming. Now, maybe you didn't see the desire expressed, not necessarily his desire, but expressed to end the marriage. Don't pretend that that wasn't the direction in which your lives were already heading. You need to be realistic. If you're not realistic, you're not going to be able to do what is necessary now to save your marriage. Now, I personally don't believe in saving marriages. As I said, I was really good at ending marriages, but I'm a goal-oriented person. And so I asked at that time, when I was making the transition from ending marriages to saving them, why do people get married? What is the goal here? It's not just to save a marriage, my goodness gracious. We don't get married just to be married. This is not a movie or a sitcom or something we watch on television where it's just we're married. You got married for express, definite purposes. Happiness above all else. You want to be happy. It is our human nature, our true human nature, to always seek happiness. It's what we want. And as human beings, it's what we are meant to evolve towards through self-work. It doesn't just come our way. This is a harsh world. This is a hellish world. It's filled with betrayal. It's filled with people lying all the time. It's filled with all sorts of negative things. Most people would rather steal from you than leave you alone. And they'll actively go about doing that. You hear about it even in families. No, we don't want to just be married. We don't want to pretend that everything's fine. We didn't learn our rules of marriage. We didn't learn how to be married. And so when I started helping people with their marriages, I wanted to have a goal that was worthy of our time and effort, not just to save it. And that means bringing the marriage to where it's supposed to be. I personally believe, and I've written a definition of marriage, I believe that God, and this is not religious, really. It's not from a religion, in other words, but it's spiritual. I believe that God is the one who created marriage. I've heard different ideas of how marriage occurred. None of them make any sense to me. But that God created marriage makes a lot of sense to me, because when you look at marriage closely, and it's important for you to consider what marriage is supposed to be compared to what your marriage is now. Marriage is designed, its very design is to boost your happiness, boost your love, teach you valuable lessons. And my definition of marriage is that it is an individual spiritual path that two soulmates take together. It's a spiritual path because that is what a spiritual path is all about, finding happiness, finding that joy, finding love, that eternal love that is there in your marriage when you know how to look, when you know how to cultivate it, when you know how to cultivate your devotion, when you know how to bring out the joy that is already there. So don't pretend your marriage is fine. Compare it to what I just talked about, what marriage is supposed to be. So compare your marriage as it stands to what I just described. In a real marriage that is functioning as it should, that your marriage still can achieve, is that beautiful state of consciousness where you're feeling love growing and growing and growing within you and within the marriage. That's why you got married. And to feel that joy, that's why you got married. And so when I began helping people with their marriages, those were the goals. Those were the goals. In fact, our prime directive is to learn how to love unconditionally. It sums it all up. So don't pretend to yourself that your marriage is fine. Compare it to what I just described. Number 5, and stay with me on this, because again, the world's ideas about this are so wrong. In the world, they tell you got to have someone to talk to. You have to share your expressions, express your emotions. You need a shoulder to cry on. You need someone who will listen. No, 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 no. Don't talk to anyone about this. This is so private. Not only that, but your effort now is going to go into revitalizing your marriage. You don't want people to start thinking about you in terms of being a failure in your marriage. They cannot help you. No one can help you. Only we can help you. Truthfully, we at the Marriage Foundation, because we know how. We've been doing this for a very long time. We're successful, and frankly and truthfully, this is our sweet spot. This is what we do. You could read the reviews and see that. And what do we do? Here's where we go into what you should do. Simply put, and this whole thing has not been an infomercial, but there is no other way that I'm aware of. Simply put, get the course for women. Don't ask your husband to get the course for men. They're two separate courses. Don't worry about whether he wants to fix it just because you say so, but get the course for women. And then let us guide you methodically, step by step. And the process that we utilize is to bring you to a place where you can start seeing things, understanding things. We give you actual things that you can do. All of them are going towards stopping the things that you've been doing that has brought your marriage to where it is today, and starting to do the things that you should do, but we go much deeper. You see, this was a lesson that I learned with my very first couple. I took months preparing to meet with them. I asked, can you hang on? You know, it was very interesting. It was in our first meeting when they came to me for mediation to divorce. And I said, so what's going on? And they both started to cry. We don't want a divorce. We just don't know what else to do. Will you help us save our marriage? It wasn't very professional of me, but I was inspired. I said, yes, but give me time. Can you stay together for a few months while I figure this thing out? I'd never done it before. And at the time, I believed in divorce. I thought that people reached the end of the line and they needed an elegant way to separate. But when I started digging into what marriage is all about, it blew my mind. It opened my eyes. And I realized we're not taught about marriage. And like I said, I have lots of psychologist friends. And when I talked to them and told them what was going on, and they started giving advice, I knew it wouldn't work. And I realized then why going to psychologists, going to couples counseling doesn't work. It's not because the people who are serving as couples counselors, who are therapists, are not good people. I'm telling you, they're great people. They're sincere. They're there to serve others, but they have been mistaught. They address marriage from the problems in, and that's not how to do it. It has to be addressed in a practical, methodical way. And what happened was, the gentleman came back to see me after we had our first meetings, and they were stoked in our first meetings, because what I did was I laid it out. I said, look, it's very simple. You want to be married, you want happiness, you want love. Well, we have a choice every step of the way, every second of the day. Do I do this or I do that? Sometimes this has many thises, sometimes that has many thats. But we can always tell that this side are positive things to do, and this side are negative things that are going to undermine our desire for happiness. It's so simple. And they agreed. And we created lists and we talked about situations and so forth. And then John, I'm going to call him John, came back. And he said, Paul, this stuff is amazing. Things are improving, but I got to tell you, I'm dying here because I can't do these things. Well, I'm a long-term meditator. Since before you were born, in 1972, I began meditating in January. That's how long I've been meditating. And so when I have a problem, I turn to God through meditation. And I sit quietly and I ask, Lord, please put the thoughts in my mind. Tell me what I need to be thinking. Show me the way. And it's subtle. One has to be calm to hear that silent message coming from God. We have to learn how to calm ourselves, which is what meditation is all about. And what came into my mind was unbelievable. It was spectacular. There was a recognition right away that one has to learn how to master their own mind, to control what's happening in the mind. And this is what John's problem was. He couldn't control his mind. And so he was bouncing all over the place. And I saw the whole thing, that we are souls. We have a mind. We're not the mind. And we're never taught this, but it's purely spiritual. Every religion will acknowledge this, but most priests and rabbis and pastors, they don't think about it either. We are the soul. We have a mind. That turns the mind into something that we can control. It's like a computer. It takes in data, it holds on to, there's a lot of storage, it calculates things, and then boom, we tell it what to do. We tell the mind what to do. We're supposed to. You see, we're supposed to listen to the mind, but then we're supposed to tell it what to do. But none of us have ever learned this. So I now recognized this has been a problem for me my entire life too. I had struggled with anger in the 90s. I could not conquer it. But now I was on the verge of conquering anger completely. It's part of what we learn, part of what you will learn in the course for women. So I realized we are souls. That's where the love is. That's where the connection is to be had, to be enjoyed. But we need to learn how to control the mind. Well, why? Why is the mind so crazy? Why do we become emotional? Why do we get angry? Why are we reactive? Oh, it was interesting what I learned. What I learned is, well, we also have a body. Yes, we have a body. You're not your body. You have a body. And so we have this body, mind, soul. That's what we are. The soul is who we are. The body and the mind are possessions. And the body is a biological entity. So it is driven by the biological drive for self-preservation. I call it the drive to survive. It can't talk to the mind, but the way it's set up, it's constantly pinging the mind. And if we don't jump in, then that drive to survive is running our lives. And it is telling us constantly to be defensive, argumentative, reactive, and not allow love. You see, the mind, because it's only a machine, can't feel love, can't experience love. And so what it does is it pushes it aside as that's not true stuff. And psychologists do the same thing. They call love an abstract thought. But think about it. Love, when you experience it, and you experienced it when you were saying I do, you've experienced it when you're seeing your kids, you've experienced it when you've seen your husband at times. It's overwhelming. The mind can't wrap itself around it. So what we do in the course is we teach you how to master the mind. Along with this knowledge came a technique called the SO technique. It's amazing. So, stop, evaluate, act with wisdom. What is the highest form of wisdom? It's love. Isn't it so? And so what we do is we take you step by step on this journey where we push aside all of the nonsense that we have learned, but methodically, so it's not like, oh, what do I do now? And you start becoming the true you in your marriage. And your husband soon takes note of it. Take a look at some of the testimonials we have. Sometimes in days, marriages start shifting. It takes time to learn all this. It's not like a course you take in 10 minutes or 2 hours or 2 weeks. It's a 12-week course, but it's valuable. And it's reasonably priced. We're a nonprofit. And if the all-at-once payment, we can spread it out for you. We want you to have this. You want you to have this. And that's what you should be doing. You should be taking the course. Why do I say that? You think it's because I want your money? Or do you think it's because I want you to succeed? Or maybe you think it's both. Well, I'm going to tell you, it's because I want you to succeed. That's why. Now, the Marriage Foundation is nonprofit, but it still has to run like a business. It still has expenses. They keep growing. We still have to pay people. We still have to pay for things, but we want you to succeed. That's what I do. Even the counselors, we have TMF trained marriage counselors. And anyone could take our course to learn how to be a TMF marriage counselor. They volunteer their time. Now, we don't just take anyone. They have to go through the course. They have to really know what they're doing, but they're there for you when you take the course. You're not going to be left hanging. You're going to know all the time. Our thing is to teach you so you know. We want you to know. We want you to understand it thoroughly. Will this work to save your marriage? Yes. Yes. Oh, but he's already got a girlfriend. Yeah, we've dealt with that before. No problem. You know, way back when I started doing this, I looked for the toughest cases. In fact, most of the cases I got when I was live on the ground in San Diego were people who I used to speak at Second Saturday, which is a divorce support group for women. And I was invited because I had a real alternative. Most of the people who spoke there were lawyers and psychologists to help people go through the process. I was there to tell them we could save your marriage. I had one woman who wrote to me from New Haven, Connecticut. And her husband, she was a professor at Yale, and her husband was also, and he took it up with one of his students, and they were shacking up together. It took us a year, but he came back to her. It took a year. She had a lot of self-improvement, and she was much happier, and he was much happier. Our stuff works. It is the future for marriage counseling. Not psychological therapy, true marriage counseling. You can benefit from it. Again, I'm Paul Friedman. I founded the Marriage Foundation in order to be of service to you, in order to spread what we're doing. I'm past retirement, obviously. I started meditating in 72. I was already 21. You could do the math. But I'm still a young man in heart and in joy. I want you to have what I have. My marriage, unbelievable. And every day it becomes better. And yours can be too. Number 5 is don't talk to anyone about it. Number 4 is don't pretend to yourself your marriage is fine. Number 3 is don't try to argue or discuss about it with your husband. Number 2, don't ask him why. Number 1, don't react with anger. The most important takeaway for you here is don't give up. You can make it happen. You don't have to get a divorce. Thank you so much. Leave a like, leave a comment. God bless you. You'll be okay. Take care.